Now go on to our next speaker, Dr. Manisha. Are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm there.
Could you share your screen? Who's going to be talking on pediatric uveitis, which is again a very important topic. She's one of the senior most consultants from Stroff Charity Eye Hospital. Has prolific expertise in uveitis and VR surgeries, recipient of innumerable awards, and has co-authored many published books. She's also the Secretary of Uveitis Society of India and Joint Secretary of VRSI. Let's hear from you, Dr. Manisha.
A very good evening to all of you, and thank you, Dr. Chitra and the AIOS ARC team for giving me this opportunity today to share the screen with all my teachers. In the coming 10 minutes, I would be speaking to you on pediatric uveitis, and as the title says, in a nutshell. So what exactly is the difference between adult uveitis and pediatric uveitis? So the main challenges in the management of pediatric uveitis are the varied spectrum of clinical presentations that we may encounter in children, a delay in diagnosis because they do not complain, especially when it's a unilateral pathology. The difficulties in eye examination, I'm sure the child is not going to be as cooperative as an adult. The difficulties in managing the children with limited treatment options, and always a risk of amblyopia being there while we are treating a child. There is an extended burden of inflammation over the quality of life. So in a nutshell, a pediatric uveitis case always remains a challenge for an ophthalmologist to manage. And very often you would realize that we have to opt for examinations under general anesthesia, which have their own associated complications. So pediatric uveitis accounts for about 5 to 10% of all uveitis population, and uveitis is the cause of significant ocular morbidity and severe visual loss in about 25 to 30% of these cases. The classification of pediatric uveitis is quite similar to an adult uveitis, but what we need to realize that they are very often bilateral uveitis cases. There is more of chronic uveitis rather than acute uveitis, and non-infectious causes are more common in pediatric age group rather than the infectious etiologies. Now coming to the common etiologies of pediatric uveitis, the anterior uveitis being the most common in about 40 to 50% of the population, and JIA is the most common cause of anterior uveitis, again in the pediatric population. The other causes are the non-infectious common causes of pediatric uveitis being sarcoidosis, TINU. Very often we can have intermediate uveitis, again idiopathic, which is termed as pars planitis, well taught by Dr. Kalpana. And the infectious causes, very often being Toxocara, toxoplasma, are again encountered in the pediatric age group. Now coming to JIA, which is an important cause of pediatric uveitis, is very commonly encountered in less than 16 years of age. It is a common cause of uveitis and visual impairment in children. The prevalence of uveitis in JIA patients varies from about 4% to about 38%, with a female preponderance. And the major risk factors for developing uveitis in patients of JIA is a female sex when they have ANA positivity. We have oligoarticular arthritis, Rh factor negativity, and when the onset is less than 6 years age of onset of arthritis, they are more prone to develop uveitis. As far as the pattern of uveitis in JIA is concerned, we have bilateral chronic non-granulomatous uveitis and very rarely granulomatous. Usually it's an anterior uveitis. Posterior segment involvement again is very rare, and it's primarily a diagnosis of exclusion. We can encounter all the complications that can happen in any other case of uveitis. And the treatment, of course, is topical steroids and cycloplegics. But sometimes we may also have to opt for immunosuppressants like methotrexate, which is an extremely safe drug, again, in children. And as Dr. Vishali mentioned, that if it is given subcutaneously or intramuscular, the side effects are minimal and the absorption is much better. Very rarely, we may also have to opt for biologics like adalimumab, rituximab, and tocilizumab. Now, coming to sarcoidosis, it's a chronic systemic granulomatous disease of unknown etiology. It's rare in children, but sometimes we may find it between 8 to 15 years of age group. It mainly involves the knee and the wrist joints, and which are often boggy, non-tender effusions with synovial thickening. These are primarily granulomatous chronic anterior uveitis with mutton fat KPs, iris nodules being the most common ocular manifestation in pediatric sarcoidosis. And they can have varied manifestations, again, in the form of intermediate uveitis with snowballs in the vitreous, snow banking in the pars plana, choroidal granulomas, and sarcoid tubercles. If we were to differentiate the involvement of the joints between JIA and also the uveitis between JIA and childhood sarcoidosis, so the JIA uveitis is mainly non-granulomatous, while in sarcoid it's mainly granulomatous. While in JIA, the posterior segment involvement is extremely rare, while it is very common in a case of sarcoidosis. The majority of the cases, the joint involvement in arthritis is pauciarticular, again in JIA, while it is polyarticular in sarcoidosis. And the arthritis is associated with marked pain and swelling of the joints, allowing limited movement of the joints, again in JIA, while the movement is usually not restricted in a case of sarcoidosis. Now, something which is important for us, for all of us to remember, is that in children, sometimes we may find an elevated serum ACE levels, and therefore a serum lysozyme is a better factor to cause or to confirm the diagnosis of sarcoidosis. The raised liver enzymes, again, can be diagnostic, and there can be associated things like hypercalcemia and hypercalciuria. The treatment, of course, remains like any case of adult sarcoidosis. TINU is something which is again found in childhood uveitis cases. Median age of onset is about 15 years with female preponderance. The symptoms can be malaise, fever, flank tenderness, anorexia, and weight loss. The ocular signs can be bilateral anterior non-granulomatous uveitis. It can also have a posterior involvement in the form of vitritis, papillitis, cystoid macular edema, and chorioretinitis. The diagnosis is based on urine analysis showing glycosuria, proteinuria, and amino acid urea. And sometimes we may also have to opt for a renal biopsy. The treatment, of course, remains again like oral steroids and immunosuppressants, and mycophenolate mefetil is often required to treat cases of chronic uveitis in TINU. Pars planitis, I will skip because it's already very well covered by Dr. Kalpana, where we now use modified Kaplan's approach for the treatment. Coming to infectious etiologies, I'll just give you a few case examples. This is a 14-year-old female patient with no history of contact, a diminution of vision for last 6 months with pigments over the anterior lens capsule, and you have a hazy view because of vitritis. You can see that there's hyperemic discs in both the eyes, and you have these multiple choroidal granulomas with exudates in the macular area. When we investigated this child, to our surprise, the Mantoux was 0 and the ESR was grossly raised to 120. But when we did the CECT, it was suggestive of large nodules in both the lung fields. And this child was apparently diagnosed to be suffering from miliary tuberculosis, was treated with ATT and systemic steroids. And you see the good resolution of the vitritis with the healing starting to take place of the choroidal granulomas. And this patient apparently recovered a vision of 6/9 N6 in the right eye, while we could not recover much of the vision in the left eye because of the exudation that had already involved the foveal area. This is again a 9-year-old boy. We have a child over here with a localized, again, vitritis surrounding or overlying the lesion in the macular area, a typical fog light head appearance. And when we treated this patient with intravitreal clindamycin and DECA along with systemic therapy, he started showing a good response, but then this child was lost to a follow-up. And when he presented 2 months later, you see that there was an evidence of subretinal hemorrhage suggestive of a secondary CNVM developing along with an epiretinal membrane. And this was again described by Dr. Avinash, that you can have these complications associated, and it is important to look for these subtle signs like subretinal hemorrhage to identify a CNVM and treat them accordingly with anti-VEGF therapy. This is another case of an 11-year-old boy with redness in the right eye for last 3 days. And on a detailed fundus evaluation, you find that there is an acute necrosis in the extreme periphery of the retina. We did a thorough evaluation of this patient. This child was again treated with intravitreal ganciclovir and along with oral medications in the form of tablet valciclovir and oral methylprednisolone, along with topical steroids. And the child showed a beautiful response where the resolution of the necrosis took place beautifully. We went ahead and did a laser therapy again to the peripheral area so that the child could be prevented from developing a retinal detachment involving the posterior pole. And the patient did extremely well, and the child continued maintaining a good vision in this particular eye.
1 minute.
I would just end my talk that in the extremes of the age, one needs to remember the masquerades, especially again in children. An important thing, again, as highlighted by Dr. Sudarshan, that you have to look for the kind of hypopyon. If you have a white hypopyon, you have a fluffy hypopyon in the anterior chamber. Again, in children, you have to keep in mind a retinoblastoma, which you may be dealing with, which may be confused again with anterior uveitis. And one has to be extremely careful in diagnosing and dealing with such patients. So I would just conclude my talk by saying that a detailed systemic evaluation is extremely important in children. Tailored investigation based on history and examination, including blood, urine, and radiology, is of extreme importance. Co-management with other specialties like rheumatology, gastrology, and oncology is of extreme importance, again in pediatric uveitis. It's extremely important to differentiate between infectious and non-infectious uveitis. And we must always keep in mind causes like masquerades, especially retinoblastoma, while we are managing a child with pediatric uveitis. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
It was a wonderful talk, Dr. Manisha. I enjoyed every minute of it. And though I don't think it's very unfortunate you're not asking questions, because your talk